Hello, everyone, and welcome to Phoenix Gaming. I'm your host, Nick Henning, and today we're not talking strategy. This is going to be sort of more of a YouTube style, just vlog situation. I just came back from the WSBG last week, the World Series of Board Gaming, which sort of was I'd already been thinking about starting the YouTube channel, but was sort of the thing that pushed me into finally creating this channel. So it's been about 1 year since Phoenix has been open, and I kind of want to take some time to think about that, reflect about that. But we're going to start off by talking about the World Series of Board Gaming and how that went last week when we were in Vegas. First of all, I'm not wearing a gray shirt. It is a gray shirt, but it's not a blank gray shirt. We're wearing the World Series of Board Gaming All-Star shirt that you get for being a finalist at a table. That maybe gives you an idea of how things went for me this year. You can see my 2 rings have not been added to, so I did not win a ring at WSBG this year. We'll get more into that a little bit later, but that's sort of a spoiler of what happens. I'm also just going to talk about WSBG and the gaming aspect and the being at the event aspect for me, because there is something about this time of year or Vegas in general that has bad stuff happening in my personal life. We're going to put that on the shelf. That's really not a part of this equation here, and I can compartmentalize a little bit, but that's something just to be aware of. Vegas is cursed. So talking about WSBG is going to be a little bit weird for me in this video. The reason is because I had, by all accounts and all stretch of the imagination, a very strong year from a competitive level. But the reality is that I didn't win anything, right? This is sort of the aspect of a winner-take-all format. So to summarize essentially what happened is I made 3 final tables. I got second at 2 of them, and I got dead last in the other final table. And I made semifinals of the 4th game, which is insane, absolutely disgusting. Like I'm aware of how hot I ran, how amazingly I demonstrated, how well I performed this year, and I'm very, very, very proud of that. I am. However, it does feel really bad. I kept using the phrase, it's like flying too close to the sun. It does feel bad to get so close, but not get close enough to get another crack at getting into the semifinals, the grand semifinals, and then getting into the grand finals, which is, of course, something that I've never done, and a handful, now 8 people, have managed to accomplish. There are a huge number of competitors at this event, and a lot of people are really, really good. Maybe everyone's really good. There's people in every event that are better than I am. So for each given event, I need to be on point, and I need to be lucky, and you need to do that repeatedly throughout the course of the day, which is a really, really tough thing to pull off. And I'm deeply aware of how unlikely it is for any given person to win an event. You have to do really well. In deciding which events I was going to play, I was between Gaia Project and Terraforming Mars on the first day. And I figured Gaia Project was going to be 3 rounds and Terraforming Mars was going to be 4 rounds. And I looked at Board Game Arena and saw that my win rate in Gaia Project was really only around 30% or 30, 1 in 3 games, basically 33%. And so a quick math formula of, obviously the odds of that change are based on your competitors. But if I said, hey, if I have a 1 in 3 chance of winning over 3 rounds, how does that compare to Terraforming Mars, where I just completely made up that I have a 40% win rate in games? 40% is a really bold win rate to claim, I think, because if we're playing 4-player games, you would expect a person's win rate to be 25% if they're equal with all other players. So I made the ambitious claim that I think my win rate in Terraforming Mars is close to 40%. And turns out that 40% to the 4th power and 30% to the 3rd power, or 33% to the 3rd power, are both pretty similar, and they both get you in at just a couple percentage points to win the event overall. So, to win an event overall, even if you're very, very good and you make really bold, ridiculous claims about what you think your win rate looks like, you still are just not likely to win an event. I acknowledge that. But I really wish that I'd walked away with a ring this year. Would have been nice to hit a semifinal. And, the interesting downside about getting second place is every single day I played 16 straight hours of games, right? I mean, maybe I'm exaggerating a tiny bit. Sometimes it was 14 or whatever. But basically, I played, between 14 and 16 hours of games on day 1, day 2, and day 3. Mix that in with meals and sleeping. I was absolutely exhausted by the time it got to the last day. Those Wingspan games, I apologize to every single one of my opponents that play with me. I was playing very sloppy. Just lots of little technical errors, some of which I caught, some of which my opponents caught, but my brain had fallen out of my mind at that point in time. And only through the hundreds of plays on Board Game Arena did I even have any strategic semblance of what I was doing on that final day to pull stuff together. But I was very, very tired by the time I got there. And I'm someone who has done the World Board Gaming Championships. You follow my videos about that. A week straight of gaming where I game all day long. There's something about playing the same game over and over again with the competitive stakes that I think just made it a little bit more tiring for me. Vegas is also ridiculous in and of itself. So all of it just adds up, right? It all just, it creates for a certain sort of environment where you're particularly exhausted, which definitely was a part of it for me. I had a really great time in my games with the exception of only one game across how many games did I play? 4, 8, 12. I think I played 15 games with the exception of one game. Every single one of my opponents was absolutely pleasant to play against. I had a nice time. There were multiple games where I was just laughing and having a good time, which again is not, you might know this from last year, but it isn't what I expected at this event. I expected it to be kind of a little bit more serious or more competitive. And I'm really impressed at the caliber of player and the quality of player. The caliber meaning strategic ability and depth, and then quality meaning how they are as human beings at WSBG. It's been a really fun experience, one that I primarily go to compete, but also I'm just really enjoying myself. Let's quickly run through our games, I guess, to talk. Well, no, before that, I want to talk about actually what was the best part of World Series of Board Gaming this year. I would say this is the first time ever in my life that I have felt famous. I'm not exaggerating when I say that 30 of you, I'm sure there's people who are watching this video, introduced yourselves to me, people that I hadn't met before, and said, hey, I've been watching your videos. And a couple of those people had really kind things to say. One woman kind of went on for a bit about how she thought it was so kind that I put strategic information out there. A group of brothers said that they found me on YouTube and are really only at the event because they'd heard about it from me. One of the ring winners was I've watched all your videos. The guy who beat me in Great Western Trail watched my Great Western Trail video the night beforehand to freshen up. I'm absolutely staggered. I'm trying not to tear up on video here because it was amazing, honestly. Having so many folks say such kind things. You make stuff, right? And YouTube tells you X number of people have watched your videos. But it all goes into sort of an ether sphere that's just sort of away. And having just so many folks come up and introduce themselves, it was really validating. It was really, really exciting. I do this channel for fun. It's just for my entertainment. More on that, I guess, when we talk about the YouTube section later. But yeah, I just do this because I love talking strategy. I like sharing that kind of information out in the world. It's something that I feel I have something to add, and having people acknowledge that just is very, very exciting. Okay. So for every person that's came up to me and introduced herself. Please know that I really appreciate it so much. It made my entire week. That the most absurd situation for sure was when I was having a conversation with an opponent that I played in a prior day. And then at the same time, Matthias Wigga, I think is how you pronounce his last name, the designer of Arc Nova, wanted to introduce himself to me because I also do the Friendly Ties podcast where we introduced the Arc Nova Marine Worlds because he'd appreciated what we'd said about his game on another one of our podcasts. At the same time as someone coming up to me and asking if they could take a picture with me because they recognize me from YouTube. Like, I was like, oh my God, like there are multiple people trying to interact with me and one of them distinctly should be more famous than I am at this event. It was surreal. It was really surreal. I feel so wonderful about it. I'm happy that people get like value out of this. Having those moments was for me the absolute highlight of the week. So thank you again, everyone, for that. Let's dive back to the event and the competition. Day one, I played Terraforming Mars, and I've practiced this game essentially with myself, but I haven't played it very much on Steam. It's a game that I think as a strength of mine, I just naturally like it plays to the strengths that I have. I've played a handful in the past. And last year at a small convention, I played and beat someone who regularly wins at the WBC. I beat someone who got second place in WSBG last year and someone who clearly had played the game a ton and ended up winning that tournament. So that gave me a little bit more confidence that I was like, oh, I knew I was good at this game, but actually I can like roll with the big guys and have a sense of what I'm doing. So I had trained for it last year and actually decided at the last minute to play Blood Rage instead of Terraforming Mars. And this year, I, at the last minute, decided to play Terraforming Mars instead of Gaia Project. And ended up placing second place overall in this tournament. I'm trying to remember. A lot of the games blend together, so apologies if I get things wrong. I think my first game, I don't remember what I was playing, but I did get all of the Jovian. I got like all of the Jovian multipliers somehow. Maybe I had AI Central and was like drawing cards or something. I don't really remember, but it was a game where I had like just the full nuts. Like everything went really, really well. I remember very few details about that first game. The second game is distinct because both my opponents from that game I talked to a lot for the rest of the event. Was a 3-player game, and I was playing Saturn systems, and I started with IO mining and the water from Europa. Those are the two Jovian tags, and IO mining is the very expensive one. And I had drafted Preludes in such a way that I could play like Acquired Company for $3 income and IO mining on the first turn. So on the first turn of the game, I had 5 money income, actually 7 money income because of the Jovian, maybe even 8 money income because of the Jovian because I was playing Saturn systems, and 2 titanium income. So I just had a huge amount of income. Then the opponent to my left, he ended up winning an Acquire, and he was Ecoline, and the opponent to my right, he was Inventrix and did the like planner thing on turn 1, or actually did it on turn 2, but basically set it up on turn 1. And he's the one who ended up winning Great Western Trail. So 2 clearly very capable opponents. And I mean like won the rings of those events. And I just had such a good start that, you know, they like hate drafted the other Jovian tags. So I never got any of the other Jovian like multipliers, very few other Jovian tags in general, honestly. I mean, I did get a couple, but very few along the way. And sort of the turning point in the game, you know, the guy that was Ecoline had also a very sick start. I'd slowed him down a little bit, and by slowing him down, actually prevented him from getting both Mayor and Gardener. Opponent to my right got Planner, and then he ended up only getting one of them, and then the opponent to my right had enough time to also get Builder. So he ended up claiming 2 milestones, but he didn't really have anything else going on in terms of like terraforming. And so what he did on one of the turns, I want to say was like turn 4 or 5 of the game, is he double funded. He double funded Researcher and either Thermalist or Miner. I don't remember which. The thing was that I actually had AI Central in hand when he did that, and I was 1 research tag away, which I had just drafted that generation. So all of a sudden he went from, you know, these 2 objectives that he thought he could claim to ones that were actually the one that was actually very, very favorable for me. And by the end of the game, I was actually able to tie on both of the objectives that he'd funded. It also had slowed down the Ecoline player, who ended up having to spend 20 to fund the landlord, which he easily won. And I won that game by a fair margin. But essentially, if I don't have AI Central in my hand when a player to my right funds that's a completely different game. That was the most exciting game of Terraforming Mars that I played in the tournament. I won by a fair margin, but it definitely stands out as my opponents were really delightful, fun to interact with. Oh, there was also a really bizarre moment in that game. They had kind of like table talked with each other about like de-drafting the Jovian tags. So I'd had a sense that they'd gotten rid of one of them, which was Ganymede Colony, but I didn't know that explicitly. And then I'd gotten a sense that they'd gotten rid of another one. And I crack AI Central and I draw 2 cards off the top and I get Terraforming Ganymede, which is one of those Jovian multipliers. And that's a sick draw. That's just absolutely amazing. But I just had a suspicion from the table talk that it wasn't supposed to be there. And I could have just left it and it would have been fine. And I'm sure that the judges would have absolutely ruled in my favor because I drew off the top of the deck. But I was suspicious enough that I asked about it. And I said to them, look, this is a weird question, but was Terraforming Ganymede the card that you drafted in this round? And they kind of both looked at me with like big wide eyes. And then they're like, yeah, it was. And I was like, okay, because then I flipped it over. I just drew it off the top of the deck. And we realized that one of the players had discarded their cards, their draft cards, to the top of the deck rather than putting it into the discard pile. And so we just resolved where I drew 2 new cards instead. And we moved on from there, which I was really happy that I said something about, because it would have been a very weird and unhappy moment at the end of the game when that happened. But yeah, those like small little like technical mistakes can happen along the way. So that was that game. In my third game, God, what happened in my third game? A really important game because it's the semifinals that got me onto the finals. Oh, right. The player to my left was playing Vitor, and the player to my right, I don't remember what they were playing. I want to say I was playing Credicore, but I honestly don't even remember what I was playing. The main story of this game is that I focused very hard on terraforming. I think we did a like 1-1-1 milestone split, but I don't totally remember, to be honest. I don't really remember what the rewards or the awards looked like either. It was either game 1 or game 3 where I played a mole hole on turn 1. I think that was game 1. I'm getting totally lost. The important thing about this game 3 was that on turns 9 and 10, the game ended on round 10. On turns 9 and 10, I finished, and then my opponents played for another 20 minutes or so. And I was convinced. At round 9, I was like, ooh, I was ahead in round 9, like before round 9. I had tons of terraforming. I really just focused on playing the Terraforming Mars part of terraforming. But my opponents had these huge engines, and the opponent on my left with Vitor was like always playing cards that had points on them. And the opponent on my right had something else spicy going on, but I don't really remember. But they'd been playing for they played so much longer. And then we go into round 10, and it's the same thing again, where I like score some points, end the round, and I scored some points. Like, it wasn't horrible, but it was not as much as they were scoring. The both of them end up playing for another 20 minutes or more after I end up finishing the game. And I think I'm just like in huge trouble. I like messaged my friends and said, yeah, there's no way I'm advancing past this round. Watching other people play for 40 minutes makes you feel like you're going to die. But turns out that I was just so far ahead in terms of terraforming points. And actually the points I had on my cards were respectable enough to keep the lead. And so I ended up advancing actually with like a relative, like not like a 2-point win, it was at least a 5-point win, I think. And so it's a good reminder that, even though the perception of like how the game is playing out could be one way, it can be easy to surprise you in Terraforming Mars. Just like if you're focusing on just scoring points, it might just get you across the finish line, which is what it did for me in the semifinals here. In the finals, then I ended up playing Inventrix because I just didn't like my starting draft. I did Lake and unme contractors. So that means that I had 16 cards on turn 1. I decided to go for the crazy gambit that I'd seen earlier in the tournament. I know it's worse in a 4-player game, but I didn't love what else I had going on. I didn't think I had anything really powerful. I didn't have a good ground game, didn't have a good way to like drop greeneries or cities on the board. I didn't like my factions. I had Chungxing Mars, Inventrix, and something else that's I think even worse, maybe Mining Guild or something like that. And I couldn't draft a ton of the builder tags. I'd sort of like tried to wheel a couple builder tags and they'd been drafted out of the pack. And so I didn't have anything really exciting going on. So I decided I would go for it. I'd do this crazy Inventrix play. And one of the cards that I had in my starting 16 cards was Earth Catapult. So that at least mitigated some of the cost of what was going on. Another one was Pets, which I figured just kind of I could play out, get a bunch of passive points off of it, which of course certainly worked. I ended up playing it out on round 2. But yeah, round 1, I just funded Planner, played Tardigrades, which ended up scoring 2 points because the game went for 8 rounds. And turn 2, I just played Pets. Turn 3, I think I played like a standard Project City and something else. Turn 4, Earth Catapult, and then the rest of the game was just playing all the relevant cards from my hand that scored points and did things. And I did really well. I scored second place. The problem was that the player to my right, Levi, who is the one of only 2 ring winners from 2022 that also run a ring in 2023, defended his event. So he's won Terraforming Mars twice now, which is just so sick. But he played Ecoline. I'd passed him kelp farming in the beginning. I didn't know he was playing Ecoline for something else really good. I honestly don't remember what I gave him, but in retrospect, I wish that I had not passed him kelp farming, but there'd be no way for me to know that. He had good preludes. He had great Aquifer and the one that lets you put a greenery into play. He ended up drawing Noctis City, which allowed him to put his greenery just in a line around without having to worry that people were like stealing his points or playing a city along the way. He could just play Noctis City later, so just kind of ring that around. And I mean, he played really well. He just was focused on scoring points, and I played a very, very bizarre strategy, and I came in second place. So I was really, really happy with that. But Levi won relatively comfortably, and there was not a ton that the rest of us did or even maybe could do to stop it. I think that maybe if we had put a couple more standard project cities like in the way of his like greenery change, we might have been able to slow him down. But I was cash strapped. The player to my left was playing kind of like an engine, science engine sort of thing. And he was so focused on building out like his system and his production that he didn't have the time. And the guy that was playing Credit Core kind of tried to do a hybrid instead of doing just standard projects. So it didn't end up working that we could get in his way enough. And we did hit him, like especially the guy who was playing Credit Core, like hit him with a handful of space asteroids, but we just weren't able to contest him enough. I feel like he kind of ended up essentially winning that game from like the beginning of the game, like the way that the draft worked out, the corporations that we ended up taking. I think he just was farther ahead. I was Terraforming Mars. Exciting, really close. Not really close. He won by like more than 5 points. I want to say it was like 7 points or something like that. I wish I could have won that game, but there's nothing. I didn't look at that game and say, "Well, I made like a really fundamental error." I'm actually really happy with how I played it. It just kind of broke the way that it broke, and that's the way it is. Day 2 was Arc Nova. Round 1, we played the A map. I don't remember a ton except for my weird opener in this game. I didn't have anything in my opening hand that I was really excited about, but I had Siberian Tiger, so I did the play a 4 spot and take the 2 Science University to play Siberian Tiger before the first break. So I was ahead like on points overall in the first break, and the Siberian Tiger lets you flip a card as well. But I didn't have anything else very exciting going on at the beginning. And then I think it was just like a normal kind of evaluation thing throughout the course of the game. I don't remember much about the end of the game and how that all panned out. But I did the sort of map A thing of moving across the board, trying to get your second worker there, because I'd flipped build and just kind of like marched across the board in that way. Second round, I pulled Randy Bueller, who literally yelled, F that, except for not the censored version when he heard that he was paired with me, which my buddy Jeff was very excited about. And then I played against a woman who I played last year in Splendor, actually. And she had an insane start. Randy and I both had really awkward starting hands, and we began the game by sponsors break for 5, sponsors break for 5. We all end up playing a couple things, but then she plays out the Horsefield's Tarsier that breaks for 4 and gives you some reputation. So she was really far ahead at the beginning, and then she flipped sponsors in order to put explorers out. So her opening game was sick. The problem was that her mid game and late game, she just ended up being kind of inefficient, like with what choices like she had to make with like the build, because she'd flip sponsors, she didn't get build flipped, and so it like was a little bit harder for her to like build out the certain buildings, and like the tempo of like how building and playing animals worked and like money ended up being a lot messier for her than you would hope to be in that position, which slowed her down a little bit. Meanwhile, Randy was running like a predator combo. He had Cheetah, which is 2 predator cards, and also the hyena compound. So he had just stacks of predators. And man, I can't even tell you exactly what I was doing, but I can tell you that I played 2 determination animals that game, which were absolutely essential. I made an error in not realizing that Randy could exactly cross, because he'd picked up a couple pack animals and I just didn't count it like a schmuck. And turns out that he then basically like ended the game about a round or 2 before I thought the game was going to end, which was sloppy on my part, but I had a determination animal to give myself a little wiggle room around it. The thing is that he ended the game. He was about to end the game. It was very clear that like on his next turn he would end the game, because he got to 99 points or whatever it was. But he would only kind of stumble across the finish line, could just barely get across the finish line there. So I ended up taking a sponsor's action, taking a couple bucks and breaking it, just so that the player after me could trigger the break, because both of us were broke and we needed the money so that we could use our animals action. She did exactly that. She triggered the break. Randy then got to go. He ended the game. Having the break did not do too much for him, because he basically had already kind of like planned how he was crossing the line. I think it gave him extra money to do like a association donation or something like that. So a little bit more, but then that allowed me to take my final turn where I could use the determination to score even more points. And I end up beating him only by 1 CP. So it's like 2 appeal or 3 appeal or something like that. Was the margin between the two of us. And in large part, I was convinced that he had me beat, because his end game goal, I was like, oh, like my end game goal is not very good. It's only 2 points. Don't have a lot else going on. I can just like barely catch up. And his end game goal ends up only being 1 CP, because he had Naturalist Zoo. And the thing is, he had to dismantle his Naturalist Zoo, because he also had the monkey thing that allowed him to get points for not covering certain icons. He had to dismantle some bonuses from that as well, because he needed to play those pack animals out to end the game. And so he ended up essentially costing him 2 CP in order to end the game, and only scored 1 CP off of the Natural Zoo end scorecard, and mine scored 2 CP, which was like literally, like I said, I won by 1 CP. So that was the difference between winning and losing. I think I had like aquatic zoo or something like that. I think I had the classic like aquatic climbing zoo as my options, and I ended up getting an aquarium, I believe, which got me halfway there. And that was it. Like that was the closest game I played of the whole tournament. A real squeaker. Not great to have to play against Randy in round 2. And we were playing on map 0 too, which is a little funky. So then we go to the semifinals, and the semifinals was map 3. I just got nutty. We had Asia as one of the goals in this game. I got nutty draws for Asia, so things worked out really well there. And I also got the Determination Cobra from Asia, because we're playing the solo rules game. I drew Expert in Asia, or I snapped Expert in Asia off the map just before Gray was going to play it. Both of my opponents flipped sponsors as their first card. One of them did it for the Association Worker, and then the other one did it for Explorer. So they had really interesting starts in that way. My game was a little bit more fundamental, but because I got essentially pretty lucky with those Asia draws, I managed to sort of like stack things up. I ran more conservation projects than everybody, and won essentially off of the back of that. The final game of this tournament, I guess the guy who ends up going on to winning this game is apparently like top ranked person on BGA. So it does feel good to lose to someone who apparently just plays this game even more than I do, which is an impressive feat to pull off. And the key moment in this game is I made a greedy play in the first round by breaking for $5. Pretty convinced that player 1 and player 2 can't do anything about it. Pretty convinced that player 3 would kill themselves by breaking as well. And I didn't put them on Horsfield's Tarsier, which was the only other card that could be a concern for me because they had built a 2 enclosure instead of a 1 enclosure. This decision will haunt me for the rest of my life. I think that if I play around that card, I probably go on to win that game. But I wasn't sure, and the extra $5 really did make a difference at the beginning of the game because I had basically a really, really good petting zoo set up that I didn't get to trigger because I was sitting in 4th seat. And the break happened when everyone else got to do something before me, and I had to discard some relevant cards, including a small animals project, which I was going to run. So instead, I discarded the small animals project along with some other very good stuff, played out the petting zoo animals after the break, grabbed a university, or I grabbed the university first, and then I played out the petting animals. And I still had just very, very good draws in this game. It was another game with Asia, and I drew the Determination Cobra again, and I drew the Asian Elephant. So I had good stuff going on, but that stumble backwards in the beginning was enough. I think that if I'd had it, I probably could have ended up winning the game. The guy who ended up winning the game had a pretty sick migration recording, just releasing animals combo, and he, as his first conservation project, took the snap cards off the board. So he was doing that with Explorer and conserve, and releasing animals means that he's just constantly triggering Explorer over and over again. I think he won by something like 10 appeal or something like that, which is it sounds like a lot, but actually I really do believe that if I had had the beginning that I should have had, I would have won this game if it plays out the same way for the rest of it, which is of course really hard to say. And that's on me. It's 100% my fault. It reminded me of my Dominant Species Marine gameplay last year where I made a very, very bold choice in the beginning, but last year it paid off and this year I was punished for it. And that's the way it goes, especially when you're playing for first place, right? It's just a rough beat, but so be it. Whew, that was Arc Nova. Man, this is already 34 minutes and we are not even partway through. We're just gonna keep going though, because I guess this is where we're at. Day 3 is Great Western Trail. Great Western Trail, I'll talk about this one a little bit less. But my first game is with 2 players who I hadn't played with before. I think this was both of their first year. And the player to my right, Jukka, he's going to go on to win the Brass Birmingham ring later. We're all playing cowboys. We only draw cowboys this game. All the buildings are for cowboys, but I end up switching out of cowboys into builders because they're more cowboys than I am, essentially. Really weird game where we're all competing for the same stuff in a 3-player game. Jukka gets hosed because the bottom 3 cards of his deck are 3 green cards. If he draws any one of those cards, he gets to deliver to the 10 spot. I think he was ahead up until that point in time. It's really tough to say what happens if he gets any semblance of luck here, but he doesn't. And I go on to win that game with just sort of a builder victory point. And the other thing that I did that I actually thought was really clever in this game is because I was sort of crappy cowboys and they were better cowboys, I actually still bought a lot of cows this game just to choke the cow market, which absolutely worked as planned. So that victory went pretty smoothly. Our second round, I am drawing a total blank on who I even played with or what even happened in this game, but it was another 3-player game. Maybe it'll come back to me later. The third round was a 2-player game. I ended up at one point with just a spread of employees. I did essentially a handful of different things throughout the course of the game, but I got ahead on the engineer track and managed to kind of claim a couple things along that. And then I was just in really good shape with was it Cowboys? I think it was Cowboys. And so I was just like converting. That's right. It was Cowboys. I was just like converting things into points throughout the course of the game. We kind of hit the mid game and I just sort of was going towards the end. My opponent, who I know from the Discord server that we share in together, was very good. He played a very tight game. I just started off ahead and kind of was ahead, I think, for the first third of the game. And he caught up a bunch at the end by essentially, figuring out cool ways to convert into points. He also, he kind of like had moved into builders and he put buildings in places that like slowed me down, played that stuff really well. We did have one awkward moment in this game where I realized he had built a level 5 building, but he only had 4 builders. And we'd like gone through a full lap around. So we had to call the judge over, and the judge basically just told him to downgrade the building and we gave him the money back. So like instead of building a level 5 building, he built a level 3 building and he got the money back. And everyone was really happy with that. Like it was I think it was a very easy way. And his comment was, oh, I could have been punished much worse for that. But, I didn't catch his mistake either until later. So we fixed it. It was fine. It really didn't change anything with the game state, fortunately, even though we'd gone for a full lap afterwards. So everything worked out there. And then I ended up beating him. Finals were a little messy for me. I made a greedy play in the beginning. I got a couple unlucky draws at the beginning. After I made the greedy play, I underestimated how much people would be scared of me. One of the players goes to block me, which I think ends up hurting him. He ends up in second place. So I'm still convinced that it was the wrong play, but I know there are other people who think you absolutely have to block the greedy play that I made by playing in the South. I felt like I was behind, so I continued to make gamble plays and missed every single one of the gamble plays. So I just kind of, seeing that I was behind, kept falling further behind, made gamble plays, fell even further behind because of it. And I ended up in 4th place. It wasn't the most horrible score. I scored in the 50s and I think the winner had like 80 some. But it was a fair margin. The winner ended up playing a builder strategy. The person in second place had an engineer strategy. And 3rd and 4th, we were both Cowboys. Although I really wasn't Cowboys at any point. I was basically just one Cowboy and then trying to score victory points at a certain point. I probably should have realized at the beginning how much of a target there was on my back and just played a lot more conservatively for that. I think also I could have made... The players that ended up winning were the players who were sort of the last into the purchase market, the head market, and the head market was at the end of the track. And I maybe should have planned to do exactly that, or I maybe should have, I don't know. I think that if I play more conservatively in this game from my starting position, there's not really anything powerful that I'm doing. So I would have needed to just amend and play a completely different game plan. I think I just didn't anticipate how much other folks play like defensively. I don't play defensively almost ever. I play defensively incidentally. So that's just the way it goes. And I ended up getting 4th in that game, which was my last final of the week. So now I've been in 5 finals across 8 different days of competition, which is pretty satisfying. Wingspan tournament we'll go into really quickly. Played 3 rounds there. Both game 1 and game 2 got a very early Ruddy Duck to draw extra cards. In game 1, I literally drew Ruddy Duck off the top of the deck, which was really, really lucky. Game 1 was like Ruddy Duck and Hummingbird, and I just flooded the market with cards and resources because someone else had a Raven. And that was just enough to make a system. I had a really sick combo in the middle where I had a gazillion cards, and I put the Dixisel, which is like the bird that you can pitch a card and it lays an egg. And then I had a copier, so I could keep using that bird over and over again. So I had this hand of 15 cards or whatever that I was able to just basically continually shunt underneath that bird, which ended up scoring a lot of points. So I could overtake a Raven in that game, which was a pretty satisfying feeling. Round 2, my opponents got Killdeer and Raven. They were like the starting flop. and I was seat 3, so they drafted those cards off the top. So I was kind of playing around those. But again, I had a Ready Duck right at the beginning, so I had a really good card draw engine. I don't remember what I did for a food engine, but I also had an American Crow at one point in time. So not only did I have some ways of getting food, but the Crow gave me some extra ways of getting food. And again, I played a copier in the middle row, and I just had a middle row that was scoring a lot of points that allowed me to overtake my opponents in both games. I took advantage of end game goals. And then in the third round, the semifinal round, I got beat by somebody who had both the Raven and the Killdeer. I'd drawn 16 cards off the top of the deck. I had a really great card draw engine at the beginning with no food draw engine. And if I end up drawing the Raven, I'm convinced I win that game. Even still, things go really well for me. I'm only 4 points off of the person who won. Like I scored like 94 points that game or something insane like that. And I could say, if my other opponent hadn't have tied me on the 2 end game goals on rounds 3 and round 4, I would have won, which is true. But of course, other opponents are supposed to be going for those goals. So that's a silly thing to compare for. But it wasn't the opponent who ended up winning. So we just kind of ended up cannibalizing each other. I had thought that Wingspan had friendly scoring for the goal end round goals. I didn't realize until this tournament. I don't know if it's wrong on BGA or if I just don't pay attention. But that was something that came up a couple times, and I was like, oh, well, that sucks. So that definitely hurt me a little bit, and that was the end of our dream. But WSBG did not end there. Actually, I said my first favorite thing was the number of people that came up and talked to me about the week and the event. But my second favorite thing is the story that I'm about to tell you. So Jukka, who's the guy that I mentioned in the Great Western Trail, wins the ring final. And that evening they pull the events, and he gets seated at Arc Nova. And I learned from his friend that he has only played Arc Nova one time ever. Everyone else at the table, Arc Nova was their chosen event for one of the days. So they knew exactly what they were doing. And I wanted him to have a good game. Like I really wanted him to have a good game. And, because we'd interacted before and he was such a pleasant opponent, I offered. I was like, hey, if you like, I can train you. And he was like, oh my God, yes, please. And, him and his buddy came from Finland. His buddy had come the year before and like brought him along with him this time. And his buddy was like, all right, well, what can I do? And he like went and like got us pizza and sodas for this like training session that we had from like 12:30 until like 3 a.m., which was insane. And I like ran through like a madman. Like I basically was teaching him some of the rules because he played the once, but it's not enough to like solidify the rules for a game like that. So I kind of like combo taught him the rules, strategy, and I basically taught him like what I would consider to be sort of the fundamental play strategy. And I said, look, I just want you to do this fundamental play strategy. If you're able to, this is what you're going to focus on. Execute these and that things. We train until like 3 a.m. We call it a night, go to sleep. Next day, I am actually in the recording booth for them live streaming the Arc Nova game because I was like typing notes to the commentators, which they didn't really need because Matthias Vigo was one of the commentators and he knows exactly what he's talking about with his game. Not all game designers are good at their games, but Matthias is actually quite good at his game and absolutely understand what's going on. So I was typing them like helpful notes, but ended up not being that relevant along the way. So I was watching this game live and Jukka executed the plan to a T. He was so precise all the way through. And then he, at some point, realized he was ahead and just pivoted into scoring points, pushing like a little bit at the time to end the game, really put the pressure on the other players. Because of a couple other stumbles or things that got in the way of the other players, he ends up winning the semifinal event, which is, I mean, like I was flooded with adrenaline for him. I ran out from the like little commentator booth thing and he was in there playing. And he's this big, he plays on the like Finnish basketball team. So he's like, I don't know, 6'5" or something like that. And he like picks me up like I'm his little girlfriend or whatever, like swings me around and like we're both screaming. Like it was just a really exciting moment because like it was insane. Like it was so insane that he is by far the least experienced player in this game and things just broke his way. And he like was like stayed on target throughout the whole game. And like, I guess he like told the other people at the table that I had like trained him the previous night because like they like before this even like as I'm like coming towards them, Jonathan, who's the guy who beat me in Great Western Trail, was like, yeah, you did it. Like your guy, like he got there. And so it was so exciting to see him win. Like he was so happy. So I got to have this other moment of just like pure joy. Like it wasn't my victory. It was a victory of this like stranger that I spent the time with to coach him up in this game. And he was so gracious too. I mean, he was like, no chance I could have done this without you. But of course, like he's the one who goes on, makes all the decisions, and then is the one who like goes on to win the game, which is just, it's just so sick. Like, so he ends up going to the grand finals because of it, which is just really, really wonderful. So that was a very nice way to capstone an event. If you don't get to be there, being there by proxy felt decent at the very least. So that was World Series of Board Gaming in a nutshell. I'd say in a nutshell, but I just talked for 45 minutes. So let me pivot right now, and I'm going to talk instead about YouTube. All right, so let's talk YouTube. So this has just been a way for me to kind of pretty easily put something out there. I don't have much of a presence. I don't advertise. I don't have a, and I don't know, like social media for the Phoenicks account or anything like that. But I am thinking about stepping it up a little bit. Honestly, having so many folks come and say really kind things makes me feel that there's a little bit of a space in board gaming for this. I hope that board gaming kind of continues to grow over the years. I think strategy content is very, very niche and the least valuable content that there is for board gaming, which is why it doesn't really exist. I've talked with my buddy John Gets Games about this, and what kind of content gets consumed and what people get paid for is not strategy content, but it's what I love, so it's why I make it. I also think that there just isn't much of it out there. I mean, the reason that these strangers found me, multiple of them were just like, there wasn't anyone else doing any of this stuff. So I'm going to keep doing this. I really like it. It's fun, and having folks like putting like a face to like, there's some value in this makes me feel like I want to step on the gas a little bit more. I'm currently sitting at about 700 subscribers on YouTube. Would love to get to 1,000, which is the magic number that you can start doing special things like making a channel, putting some monetizing on it. I don't personally need to make money off of doing this, but there's another strategy YouTuber who goes by the name of Orsky, who primarily does, I think, Dune Imperium stuff. He's got about 4,500 subscribers, and he also has been doing this for a little bit over a year. He put out a video recently talking about what his channel's like money situation looks like, and he showed basically that he's made about $2,700 in the past year off of this, and then he was like, and that's, I just put it back into the channel. I buy like a better microphone, a better setup, and like that kind of stuff is really appealing to me. Like this is not something that I think is going to be my job. It's not even something that I super want to treat as a side hustle, at least right now, although I am thinking about that more in a minute. But the idea of just like having a couple extra dollars so I can put it into some quality and some effort of things, having a motivation to put a little bit more effort into the editing or learning some more stuff, it makes a difference. So my personal goal right now is to get to 1,000 subscribers so I can do some cute stuff with that and start building out. I've been debating making other kinds of videos. For sure, the main thing I'm going to stick with is since we have these new WSBG final tables, I am going to continue doing my commentary about those. That strategy commentary is what's fun for me. I know they're like long form videos, and that's not generally good for the general populace, but I also in this past year, started doing the Frosthaven videos because I was playing a ton of Frosthaven, and just a couple weeks ago started doing more like philosophy type things, talking about also World Board Gaming Championships and stuff like that. So I'm going to keep doing things like that. I mean, frankly, this is my channel where I'm going to talk about the things that I feel like I'm going to talk about. I've debated doing like a couple, review type things. Like this isn't going to be a channel where I do reviews, but just talk about a game that I've been playing a lot that's been exciting to me and interesting and new to me. For folks that follow and have a sense of what I like to do, maybe they see some value in doing that. And I'll brainstorm some other ideas, but the focus is going to stay on strategy. It's going to stay on talking about those things and living more in that kind of like number space, that head space. Because I think it's what this channel is really about. It's going to kind of stay like that. But yeah, I'd like to continue ramping it up. I don't think I'm going to become a more regular poster. Like I have a whole real life to deal with, and stuff is going on in my personal life right now. As well as like I have a job, and like finances are a thing, and there's only so much time that I can and want to dedicate to doing this. This is really my only like main project, but I also like want to spend my time playing games and writing for my D&D game and so on and so forth. So, hello? I'm sorry, I don't actually have time to talk right now. I just want to make sure it wasn't an emergency. Teleprompters. Telemarketers. There we go. All right. So that brings us to our last topic, which is about Phoenicks and Phoenicks branding. And I've had a friend who recently is trying to convince me to essentially like make a business to organize all this stuff. I've been talking with a few folks about figuring out how to fund going to WSBG next year. I really would like to go, but it is a financially unwise decision for me, both in terms of times of vacation days and how much it costs to go and eating in Vegas and blah, 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 blah. So I've been trying to figure that out. And frankly, I do other game stuff, right? Like I helped a group I wrote their rule book for their game that they're releasing this year for Quirky Quarks, which is coming out. Actually, I think it's out already. I believe that they're bringing it to Essen as kind of the like grand reveal of it. I historically have messed around with designing games, which I've been thinking about again. So could be something that I've got a few small things that are cooking around that I'd like to push on. Some people have asked me about like whether I would like do board game coaching, which I've been debating. I certainly would be happy to do. I've done some development work for a couple games that are out there. So all of that I've kind of just done like as an individual, as just kind of like a Venmo side hustle things. But I've been thinking about putting together essentially like a little Phoenicks corporation thing. I have to learn more about what that looks like, and if it makes sense, and then kind of tying all of the game stuff I do into one, right? The YouTube channel, the competition, all of that just like going together essentially into one thing as like a thing to like sort of formalize that, like, hey, this is all a bunch of different disparate things that I do in the gaming world, but actually like as like a corporation or whatever, like as a little entity, I can then like, make it a little bit more formal, make it a little bit more useful. So that's just something that I'm thinking about that I'll have to decide more as time goes by and what develops. But could be an exciting development for me. And we're approaching on an hour right now, so we'll cut this guy at the end here. If you watched this whole video through, thank you so much for listening to me ramble. Hopefully it was fun and interesting for you to just kind of hear my takes on how things went, primarily at the Vegas event. And we're going to continue making content. I've had a couple requests. Generally, if there's stuff that you want, I like when people request things. It makes it very easy for me to decide what I'm going to do. So I'll be working on some of those things going forward. But the first thing you can really expect to see from me are commentaries on the WSBG videos that have already been released. Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful day. See you around.